All right, everybody. Hope you are having an absolutely fine Tuesday. Welcome to the FNGO's lunch break. I see a couple of you guys, Doc Holliday and Bill, you're already in the comment section, and I know there'll be other guys joining us as well. Um, hey, I'm actually getting excited about this idea. When Josh approached me about doing a daily conversation kind of show, I was like, yeah, I don't know what we're going to talk about. But the more I think about it, the more I get to connect with you guys through the day, maybe help your day get along a little bit better. I'm getting excited about it. And I know some of you guys from yesterday's program watched it later. So if you're watching it at a later date, we encourage you guys to, if you can during the day, join us. If not, we appreciate you watching it at a later date. So what's up, Jonah, guys like that? Hey, there's a lot. We had a great show. Bill said good show last night on the live. Well, we had a great show last night. You guys definitely need to go back and check that out. What's up, Kyle Brown? Silverpunk, how you doing, buddy? So last night we talked about soft plastics, and the thing about it is like we only had 2 hours. We could have talked for another 10. What's for lunch today? Hey, listen, Coke Zero, and of course, y'all watch this. My wife just called. Hey, Amanda. Hey, can you hear me? Hello. Oh, let me put the speaker. Hey, you know that you're just called in during my live podcast?
Excuse me?
You know I do a live podcast every day now from 12 to 1?
No.
Well, now you're on speakerphone and everybody in the world can hear you.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, excellent. So can you guys hear my wife on the phone right there? I'm just curious in the comment section. I'm just curious. They're going to say, let me call you back as soon as this is over with. Okay, babe?
I want to know if you're for or against forward-facing sonar.
Are you guys for or against forward-facing sonar? So what
I'm just kidding. And what color worms?
And what?
It's always going to be the pumpkin green or some shit.
Watch your mouth, Amanda.
I just said shit, Danny.
All right, I got to let you go. So there's my wife, guys, right there. I'll call you.
Where is the shop vac?
The shop vac's in my, I don't know where the shop vac is. I'll call you when this is over.
You know where it's at. Tell the world where it's at, Danny.
It's in my truck. So anyway, it's in the truck at the house, honey. Love you. Bye. Hey, that's a live show for you guys right there. So I forgot to turn my volume down. But if your wife calls, you got to absolutely answer it. So yeah, I'm brave. Yeah, Cletus, she just said that. So want to know where the shop vac is. But anyway, hey, that's a live show. But anyway, you guys check it out. But what's cool about last night when we were talking about those soft plastics, all right? Today, John, last night he had Magnum Bait Company. He had those guys baits there. Well, I got to text with the owner today. So next Tuesday night on the Livewell, Dan, and I hope I say this right, Bavery, he's going to come on, and we're going to talk more about how we can take those big soft plastics and help you guys catch some big bass with it. So that's what we're going to try and do. Also, too, we got a lot of stuff going on the real quick on the channel. Tony Collum is starting to do a Tony's Tackle Tip Tuesday. For us, he put out a video yesterday. You guys check it out. It's really cool little thing you can do with a crankbait. And I encourage you guys to watch that. Another cool thing about sitting here at the shop is all the people that come talk to me. My buddy John, and I think it's Sarah. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, dude. But he came in. We talked about big swim baits this morning, and he gave me a Huddleston. Just gave me a Huddleston. Said, go throw it. So, I mean, there's some great people in this community and all that. And he also said that Spro KGB swim bait rod that I got from Spro is the bomb. So now I got an excuse to go throw that thing. So anyway, yeah, it's pretty cool. Silverpunk says, I like Amanda. My wife is spunky. I guess, Cletus knows her. That's a good way. She's full of spirit and she's spunky. So we'll do that. With this lunch break, you guys, we can go anywhere you want to go in the comment section. Andy Miller's on the road in Alabama. That's pretty cool. Appreciate you joining us. We can go anywhere. So if you guys have anything you want to specifically talk about or got a question for me, no matter what topic it is, whatever, you can throw that in the comment section. But I decided, with the Livewell, I kind of plan out the show, the topics that we want to do. But for this, I just want to wake up every morning and say, hey, what are we going to talk about? And I'll get to that in a second. Nathan Owens. Hey, Danny, I got a question. Do you know a company that pours plastics called Bait Junkies or Georgia Lure in Royston? I just got a job there. No, I do not, Nathan. However, through you, you can introduce me to them. That would be pretty cool. If you guys know about Bait Junkies or Georgia Lure in Royston, let Nathan know in the comment section right there. Christopher Page, when are you getting Paul back on the live show? Are you talking about Paul Coonan or Paul Bork? Which one are you talking about? I know a couple of different Pauls, or Paul Benson or whoever. Just let me know, Christopher Page, on that. So I got up this morning and I said, okay, what am I going to talk about today? And a lot of things went through my mind, but here's what got, really in my head. Do y'all have any fish stalker lures in your store? I may have a hookup for you. Message me. I'd like to do that. Rick Moore, great show last night. I probably spent too much money buying baits on Amazon. Hey, you can't blame me for that, but I get it. But this morning I got up and I was thinking about all the great people that I get to talk to and how blessed I am to do that. And I got thinking about people from my past. Now, every one of you guys that fish, what is for lunch? Coke Zero. Everybody that's fished has had a person in the past that has influenced them fishing in some way. Now, we all, lots of times we say our father, our grandfather, and that of course was true for me, and we'll talk about that. But sometimes somebody in your life gives you a little tip. And I got to thinking about, I had an uncle named Tommy. Now, the best way, he got killed in a car wreck, died way too young. But I remember him from growing up. And I was probably around 20, I think, when he passed away. But when I was, 12, 13 years old, Paul Driscoll, I'll reach out to him, Christopher. I'll reach out to Paul, see what I can do. I was fishing. Tommy, the best way to describe Tommy was if Jesus and Jesse Duke from the Dukes of Hazzard, Uncle Jesse, if you could kind of combine the beards and everything, that's the way he dressed. I mean, he kind of we actually called him Jesus back then because that's what he looked like. He didn't act like him though, but he was a great dude. But he was what I would say is as he was that country guy that always wore overalls, had the pot belly, the beard and everything, but he knew how to do a little bit of everything. He was a true country guy. Now, I remember fishing. Bill Dance was one, absolutely. I remember my dad had a farm pond that was loaded with big bass, and I was just getting into bass fishing, and I was trying to pick up certain new baits. I was throwing artificials and all that, and I couldn't get bit. Now, granted, I'm a young guy just getting into this. And I remember he always fished on Lanier and everything, and he came up to me, he goes, why are you throwing that? Why? And I think I had a white trick worm on at that time trying to learn that, and he's like, why are you throwing that? And, of course, I went through the whole spiel, and he goes, do you know anything about what bass really eat? And he goes, do you know what forage is? And I'm like, I hadn't studied anything like that. So he got to talking, and he goes, in this lake, they eat brim and they eat crawfish. They eat other bass, but he was talking about brim. He goes, that's why you need to learn about this. And he goes, if you want to catch the biggest bass in a lake, and of course, he's old country boy. He goes, get you a tube of crickets, catch your brim, put the brim on a hook. And so that's what I started doing. Now, growing up, 6, 7, 8 pound bass were common in this lake, and I didn't know it was anything special. I was kind of isolated right there. But what it taught me, and that's kind of what come to my mind, what it taught me was how he, at that point, just that little statement about brim kind of got my mind to spinning and thinking about what fish eat. And so like Ron said, one of my great uncles really helped me learn how to worm fish with a spinning rod and 10-pound line, taught me to crawl the lure along the bottom. And that's kind of what I'm talking about right there. And Tommy just said, hey, if you want to catch the biggest bass, you got to throw what they eat. Now, when we go down the Livewell, now we're talking about forage species, threadfin, blueback herring, but it was really simple. And he really kind of simplified fishing for me at 13, 14 years old. Because I was really trying to, we get the Bass Pro Shop catalog. I'm looking at it. It looks like, everything at Christmas for a young guy. I wanted to order everything, every color. But do you guys have a guy in your life that you personally knew that just threw a little bit of information like that out to you that made you a better angler, or that you even remember? I'm 53 years old. That happened at 13. I can still remember it in my mind, him sitting on that bank telling me that. Um, let's see, silver pump. My grandpa would take me to farm ponds using cane poles for catfish. And that's what I'm talking about. When we have our live wells now, every day, we're arguing forward facing sonar technology, the newest rods, everything. But sometimes it's just these little tidbits of information. And sometimes we overthink things. I always say there's two kind of lures. There's those that catch fish, and the rest catch anglers. If you own a shop, you want to catch some anglers like that. But to be honest, if somebody comes in, I will kind of say like, I know I carry it, but this might be better for you. But I remember that. I go back to my past, and I'm remembering what my Uncle Tommy would say. I remember my dad would only fish with a Zebco 33. Zebco 33. He wouldn't fish with anything else. So I bought my first bait caster. I'm going to show my age right here, from a Kmart, back when Kmarts were the thing. Yeah, I'll sell you a Hellraiser, Tony. It was a Ryobi. I don't know if you guys knew that Ryobi used to put out bait casters, but I think back in the day it was like $29 or something. And I saved my allowance and went and bought it. And I remember my dad saying it. He's like, "Why are you throwing that? Why are you throwing that?" He only fished with his Zebco 33. Now the Zebco 33s back then were a lot better than the ones today. But that's all he would fish with. And I still have some of my dad's. If you guys remember, the good Zebcos, you used to have to take a screwdriver, a flathead, or a dime or something and actually open them up to get the line in and off. So I remember that influence from my dad. And still my favorite way to fish is with the tube of crickets after brim, despite all this bass stuff. Ken Pruitt, drop minnows in a tank with a crawdad and watch how a bass turns to eat the crawdad. Minnows will be gone the next morning. Yeah, it's crazy. Cletus, it all started when I was 3 on the back of an old Stratus with my dad and grandpa. I remember slinging a spinning rod with a cast master into schooling fish and tearing up their ass. That's the way he said it. And Ron, I still have my first bait caster, and it was a Ryobi as well. And they were terrible. I mean, you start reeling it, and it, how your line thing will get stuck and just right there in the corner. And so, your spool of line was always messed up. But that's what I learned how to throw on. Messick Outdoors. Me and my dad and my papa started bass fishing in a 15-foot aluminum boat, dragging a Texas rig worm at night. That's all we knew to do. Yeah, and Silverpunk says the only lures we had were night crawlers and chicken liver. And so, thinking about that, I kind of think about today's youth a little bit too, because they're so far advanced than where we were. We got kids that can work an iPhone. They can work an iPhone now at 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, I was eating dirt. Hell, I was eating dirt up till I was 8, but it's different today. And they kind of miss out. I'm wondering if they miss out having that one person that would just kind of show them something, show them a way to do something like that. Ken, pistol grip with an Abu Garcia reel. For sure. Messick Outdoors. Pretty cool to see everybody started the same. And it's kind of lost these days. Like, Forsyth County, I grew up in Forsyth County, and there was a farm pond on everybody's property. We had more 5-acre and smaller lakes that we could fish. Of course, you had Lanier and all that, but we were able to go fish all these residential ponds, and now you can't because they're surrounded by subdivisions. And how many dads now take their kids and parents, you see them in a car, they got a pad in front of them, or they got an iPhone in front of them. Are they missing out on that? I still remember my Uncle Tommy's like, if you want to catch the biggest fish in a lake, throw a live brim. I still remember my dad, with the Zebcos. My grandfather catfished with the old Ambassadors, those red ones. I forget what is it, 5200 or whatever. And I remember sneaking in when he would go to work. They lived right beside me. I would do 2 things to my grandfather, and he's going to get me when I get to heaven and see him. First of all, he liked to drink. And so every day he had a cooler sitting out on his front porch, and he'd come home from work with his ice and his Budweiser, and he'd put them in there. Me and the local kids would hide under his deck, and we'd wait till he get in a little bit. Now, he drank heavy. He did quit before he passed away, but he drank heavy at one point in his life, and we'd wait till he get nice and toasty a little bit, and then we would kind of reach up there and we'd sneak one out, and we'd sit under his deck, and we would drink his beer, and I could tell he'd come out and he'd start counting. He's like, he knew something was wrong, but he never caught me. And if he did, he never said anything. But what I'd also do is when he was at work, I would sneak into his tackle box. That's how I got my first floating Rapala, my first broke back Rapala. And he didn't fish a lot. A lot of the times they fished, they use live bait and all that, but they all had them lures. And I would sneak in and I'd take a lure and I'd take his ambassador out and I'd try to learn how to throw it. And then I would make sure I put it back up before he got home. And I lost half his lures and all that, but never did fuss. But those are the things that I remember. In the comments section, my grandfather wanted to catch crappie to eat, but I learned how to fish that way. First crappie jig, a split shot to float. That's the way to do it. Patricia Leanne, Zebco 33, live spring lizard. Can't do that no more with them live spring lizards, but I remember a day when you could. Cletus, we always complain about technology, but for those that didn't have a fishing influence in their life growing up, the new generation has access to watch as much fishing inspiration. That they do. There's a lot more information at hand. But ain't it something kind of cool, though, that I can sit back and remember an actual person telling me and not have to look at it like I watched a YouTube video. Hey, I watched this YouTube video today, and they're great. I'm telling you, Tony's little how-to, it's a great tip. But I still remember, my Uncle Tommy, with that Jesus beard and everything and them overalls and that big-ass gut he had telling me, hey, use a brim. Tony said, my dad didn't like to fish, but he still made sure to take me and put me together a tackle box that was mine. Now that I think of it, for someone that didn't like fishing, he sure did take us a lot. And you're blessed. Tony, think about that. You're blessed. Ron said, the one morning I tried a hula popper and I'd caught a fish on it. I was hooked on bass since then. I think I was 6. And Ron said he probably liked being outside. Now, I had a grandfather on my other side, my dad's dad. He didn't fish that much, but he would take my cousin and them out on a dock. And while they fished, he would take some line, tie it to his toe, put a worm on or something. He would just throw it off the dock and sit there like he's sleeping. If he get a bite, he would kick his toe up. You don't see people doing that no more. Kind of reminds me in Puerto Rico, the guys hand lining and all that. Corey Hamilton, my father is big in trout, but I learned bass fishing from my buddy Peaches and right here on the Livewell. Well, buddy, I'm learning right there with you as we go. George Thornton, I had a Johnson Century reel, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Would cast gold Rapala topwater, watch Virgil Ward fishing show. Listen, if you had one of them old Johnsons, and I got 2 of them out in my truck as we speak that I bought off of eBay, that by far is the best casting reel that has ever been made. And if you know what I'm talking about, some old little green ones. I think they cast a country mile. I think that was their slogan back then, cast a country mile. The problem with the ones I got off eBay is I got to get some drag, find somebody to help me fix the drag on them. And if I can do that, I'll actually brim fish with them. But you could throw a pencil float and a cricket 50 yards, it seemed like, with those things. Messick, I want to introduce my daughter to fishing by us going out and finding worms and just old school brim fishing. Yes, technology has its place and time, but I don't want her to rely on it. I will tell you this. The best way to get a kid fishing is brim, because when you get in the right spot, you can catch a bunch of them, keeps them active, keeps them motivated, then go to the next level. So that's a good way to start. Cletus, definitely not the same as a person introducing it, but it's definitely contributing to opening up the sport to more people that would have never been exposed to it. 100%. You're 100% correct. I cannot argue that at all. Listen, I'm not a mechanic, but I have fixed our cars a lot through YouTube. I pull up YouTube and like how to do this. So the same with fishing. I 100% YouTube and other social media kind of like that has opened up a world to people to do things that they wouldn't normally do like that. So I agree with you 100%. What's up, Alex? Ken says, best memories with friends were things where they would go wrong and we would figure it out. You know what I'm saying, bubblegum. I know what you're saying. Now, I will say this, since you said bubblegum, the first time I saw a bubblegum colored trick worm, I was fishing with my cousin, Jason Glaze, and we had a trailer park beside us, Twin Lakes Trailer Park in South Forsyth, had 2 lakes, both about 5-6 acres and loaded with bass. And I'd go ask the owner of it if we could fish every so often, and he'd let us do it. He pulls out this bubblegum worm, and I'm not going to tell you the things that I said right here because they would probably get me demonetized, but I basically made fun of him. And he said, just watch. 6 bass later to my none. I said, "Hey, let me have one of them bubblegum colored trick worms." So I remember things like that. I remember the lake; those lakes were drawn down one time, and there was an island, and I went 100 miles an hour as fast as I could to that island and jumped on it so I could actually cast to the water. Well, the grass had grown up. I didn't know. Well, I hear this sound, and I didn't know what the hell it was. Well, I looked down and there's some geese, and they had a nest right there. And that thing beat the hell out of me across my back all the way back to the shore. I was running, and Jason, I think, was with me again at that, and he was just dying laughing. Those are the things you get, those memories like that. So 100. Brim is a gateway drug, 100%. 100%. Nathan said, my dad never bass fished. It made it very rewarding that no one taught me and I could catch fish and learn my own way. I get that too. YouTube taught me how to bass fish, but it's insanely confusing when you start. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's kind of like, we get guys on here that are like, they want to do some advanced techniques on the live well and all that. And it's really cool listening to them say that. But you can. When I had that conversation, John Aldred comes up here all the time. He likes throwing big swim baits. I don't throw. John Sarah come up this morning, and we're talking big swim baits and all that. It's something that I want to learn how to do, but it seems like I told him, how the hell do you start? What's the easiest way to start? Because you can really overdo it, and got to keep it simple. Messick Outdoors, not to change the subject, but can anybody give me info on the racetrack in Lanier? Hard to find anything about it. So it's up around, and you guys in the comment section, correct me if I'm wrong. It's on the north end of the lake. It's up around Sardis, I want to say, right there. When the lake gets way down, as it did back in the early 2000s, 2010, something like that, when we had a drought or whatever, you could see the grandstands. And that way, that's where I kind of know it. I don't know exactly the exact location, and I don't know the name of it. What's up, James? But it's there. It's there. And so if you guys in the comment section know anything about the old racetrack that's underneath Lanier, Laurel Park, Tim White said. Okay, that's right. It's up by Laurel. I knew it was north. It's pretty cool that they flooded all kinds of stuff. Cam, I didn't get into fishing until I got my freedom back. I'm glad you did. Glad you changed your life. And I started with catfish. When I hooked that 25-pound flathead, I've been addicted to it ever since. And yes, I'll go fishing with you one of these weekends right there. So Kevin M says Laurel Park right there. I guess you probably could YouTube it. You definitely can Google it. Silverpunk, I use YouTube religiously for learning, but it also empties my wallet because I want to buy everything they hype up. The big thing about YouTube, when you find a person that you like to follow and you make that connection with them, you learn who you can trust, who you cannot trust, because there are guys out there. I call them, I shouldn't say this, but we used to call them product whores when we first got into Fish North Georgia, that they would, if a company would give them something free, they would go out and blast it. And they would like one company 1 month, 2 months later, they got another company. We kind of made fun of those guys a little bit. Find that guy that sticks with a company or a particular kind of thing. Learn to trust them a little bit. And they give out good stuff. I'm real curious watching John when he brought those big Magnum baits for lakes like these electric only lakes. They got a lot of largemouth in them, like hickory log, where you got to go through 3,000 little bitty fish to get that 8-pounder, and they're there. If these big, a 10-inch Cinco, and I found out that Magnum is from Houston, so it makes sense. Texas throwing big baits, but will those baits translate? And everybody's like, yeah, for sure. I throw a Cinco, I'm throwing a 5-inch Yamamoto. That thing would have just ate mine all to pieces if they were live animals right there. Messick Outdoors, not sure if y'all fish at night, but throw those big swim baits in the underwater green lights and just hold on and thank y'all on the racetrack right there. Green light fishing, yeah, for sure. But you got to absolutely, you got to beat Alex Purrs to the green lights. He's sitting on them with a kayak. Nathan Owen says, I like O'Brien Latimer and Lucas Black. I got Lucas Black's number. I talked to him just recently about getting on. And Carson, no fancy coffee today, because that thing gave me the squirts, dude. After this show yesterday, all the way up to the live well, my stomach was it was dying. What's up, Farmer? You guys that fish green lights, Alex, if you're still on here, what are you throwing at the green lights right now? And James, you like these segments early. I get it because you go to bed about 8 o'clock at night. Clint, I forgot to give you that reel last night. Alex said to you. So, and so Alex says, "You damn right I am." He's on those green lights right now. What are you throwing? But back to the thing. What was your guys' earliest influences? Was it your dad? Was it your grandfather? Or was it a buddy? I'm real curious. And do you remember those conversations that you had? Because as Clint said, right now we are inundated with information. That's what we try to do here with you guys on the Livewell is give you information. And that's easy to do, but yeah, we try to keep it simple. But you absolutely can get overwhelmed with it. But I find that when guys come into the shop and we sit down and we talk, and we don't always talk fishing here. Guys open up about things in the shop, and we're able to talk about stuff. But when I say something that you guys have told me from the Livewell or something, and it's this little new technique or something, their eyes glow. And same thing, you know, so there has to be people in your life that have done that. James said my pops was 100% the reason I started fishing. Jonah said, buddies for me, my family never fished growing up. Andy Miller, Cedar Creek, your favorite small fish factory is a great swim bait lake. Cedar Creek is, of all the electric only reservoirs in the state of Georgia, Cedar Creek, I can't stand. I just ain't figured that lake out. Now, Messick, Tim White in the comment section. This is back to the underground, the underwater racetrack. This is for you. If you are at the bridge and are looking at the ramp at Laurel, the racetrack is to the far right on the side of the river channel. So there you go. There you go. Tim gave you exactly where it's at. Alex Purrs, underspins, jerk baits, and worms. That's what he's throwing at green lights right now. Kyle Brown, my father and my grandfather, pond hopping to creek wading. And Alex, do you ever throw crankbaits on those green lights? Right there. So, and Tim Messick said, thank you for that information. Do you guys remember your earliest memories of fishing? Now, my earliest memories of fishing was in a little creek called Johns Creek, which is now basically Metro Atlanta now. My grandfather would get a cane pole. We would dig up a couple of worms in the yard. We'd go over to this creek, and this is what was interesting. We didn't fish for the brim that were in it. He would fish for the crawfish. And the crawfish would they just grab it. He didn't hook them. They would grab it, and he would yank them out of the water, and then he would take a crawfish's tail, and he would bust it. And then he would take a little knife or something, he'd cut those pieces of meat up, and he would stick them on the hook, and that's what we brim fished with. And the reason being was the meat was a lot tougher, and those little brim wouldn't steal it as fast as they would steal worms. I remember those like crazy doing that. How's Latham fishing recently? Jonah, Tim and I can probably attest that it's tough. It's hot. You can catch fish, but most of the fish that we caught were caught early. Kevin said he wore them out on Latham on Sunday. Well, that's because we didn't on Saturday. So we left you some right there. Dave Aldridge, my dad got me started, but don't sleep on Bass University. It has helped me the most since moving to Georgia 7 years ago. A lot of great information on that. Messick, Ken Pruitt said you can look up Looper, Looper Speedway, and get more information. Bill said, my dad started me with a Zebco 33 Classic, and I believe it was a Mitchell 301 open face. Those are good ones. Alex says, my dad's brother up in Michigan has a great pond on his farm. How many fish fries out of that one? Or had many out of that one. James says, and advise, let's see, I actually do remember my first bass. I was about 7 years old, caught it on a live cricket under a bobber. Kevin was off Latham by 11. Paul B says, I remember the first time fishing brim with worms in my aunt's boathouse on Wiley. So that's pretty cool. Alex said he caught a 3.5 largemouth on my birthday from Latham. So a lot of people, influence us when we go fishing, and it's pretty cool. And we always expect dads and grandfathers. That's the thing, and that's why my Uncle Tommy stands out to me because of what he said. Justin Nichols Productions grew up fishing at my great grandfather's pond with my family using cane poles and crickets. Fish back then apparently didn't like kids talking. At least that's what they told me. That right there is a good point. How many of us had a dad that said, "Be quiet, be quiet. You're gonna spook the fish. Gonna spook the fish." That's a great point, Justin. 100%. Doc Holliday, my dad had a grocery store and bait and tackle store. I had a million contacts. Listen, I don't doubt that a bit. What a way to grow up. What a way to grow up. Um, yeah, we had an old aluminum boat. I still have the boat. Lumacraft 1436 and all that we would. And I don't know how many times I heard my dad or my grandfather say I was going to spook the fish. Now, I do have a good memory with my grandfather. First time we ever run a trot line across the lake. Um, it was really cool going out with my grandfather. He baited it with chicken liver. And yet this lake was about 2 acres, just old stump filled, nasty lake. Had great fish in it. So we would go back and he was teaching me how to take catfish off of them. Well, the first time we had one of these big ass I call them loggerheads. I don't know what the hell you guys call them, snapping turtles and all that. We had a snapping turtle and it wasn't moving. We just lifted up. My grandfather told me to reach down and grab it by the head. It's dead. Now, 13, 14 years old, whatever, I reached down there and I tried to grab that turtle by the head. And I remember the words that came out of my mouth when that head moved all of a sudden. And my grandfather started laughing like crazy. He thought it was funny. I mean, I could have lost a finger. I could have been seriously hurt, but he thought it was the funniest thing in the world. But then he got real serious and told me to get that turtle off there. And I said, hell, I ain't grabbing that shit. I ain't doing it. You get it. And then he wore them old trucker style hats that had like the Bass Pro Shop hats, had that real soft front and had that big old knot on the top. It said Cordovan Tire. He worked for a tire dealership. And then he started popping me with that. He popped, get that turtle off. So I finally grabbed it by the tail after I got the hell beat out of me with his hat and all that. And then he took it home. And my great-grandmother was still alive at that time. And I watched him clean a turtle. And that's the first time I ever ate turtle. And it might have been the last time I've ever eaten turtle. Carson Fowler, talk a little more about using them seltzer things for bedded fish. Never have I heard some redneck shit like that before. If you take some Alka-Seltzer and you take some pantyhose and you put a couple Alka-Seltzer and you wrap them up in that pantyhose and you put them on a hook, get your little weight. Don't do this, guys. This is illegal. This is back in the 80s, okay? And you would take that Alka-Seltzer and you would throw it in a bed. Randy Blockett would have a shit fit if you heard me talking about this. It sits down and, Alka-Seltzer start bubbling. Just think about what a bed of bass is going to do. It's going to get that bubbling thing and it's going to pick it up. It's going to carry it out of the bed and you yank its ass. So it is a redneck thing to do. But again, back in the 80s, we didn't have rules like we do now. Another thing, my grandfather had one of them old crank telephones. It had 2 lines coming off of it that went to a piece of not chicken wire, a little thicker than chicken wire. And if you went to a creek or a lake that had a sandy bottom and you threw that thing on the bottom, highly illegal. So if a game warden's watching, hey, I don't do this anymore. But you would crank it and it would send a current out to that. And soft-bodied fish like catfish and all that would float to the top. It would shock them. It kind of like these biologists do. But it's a redneck thing. And there is a guy here in Marble Hill that still has one. I saw it last year. Messick, turtle soup, Ron. Yeah, I know. How was the fishing back in the 60s? My grandpa talked about it all the time. It was better. Everything was better in the past. I would say the fishing today is a lot better, but it was a simpler time. Paul B., people used to do that all the time. Back when nobody was throwing fish back either. My grandpa would have vested me for throwing a bass back in the water. They did. They kept everything. Ron Swinford, they used to sell worms that had a hollow sack to put Alka-Seltzer pieces in it, and it worked 100%. Christopher Elrod, the old bass baits from the 40s had a place to put seltzer tabs. And Chris Nichols, old school electro fishing. Dude, seriously, there's a buddy of mine that still has it. And it was that old style telephone that you've seen back in the old movies where you had to pick up and you had to crank it to get, I guess, the operator. And you had the old woman at the switchboard. Annie Sue was at the switchboard and you would tell her and she would switch it. But yeah, it would do that. My grandfather had one of those. James Archer, Lanier is on fire, caught 18 before lunch today. James, I need to go fishing with you. Ron, appreciate it. Get out there, go meet your aunt for lunch like that. Doc Holliday, onion sack of beaten up green walnuts will bring all fish to the top in summer when the creeks were really low. Hey, that's interesting. That's interesting. Afternoon, Western Maine Outdoors. So listen too, and this is highly illegal, and I would not tell anybody to do that. But in South Forsyth, back in the early '80s, it's when I first learned about snagging fish, because these guys ate fish, and if they saw big bass, they basically would take a treble hook and they take a big old one of them old red and white red bobber floats, and however deep the bass was, and lots of times it was on a bed, and they'd put a little weight on it, and they would throw that thing past the bass. And I watched this growing up, just like I used to go to chicken fights, which is highly illegal, but this is what you did back in then. And they would slow reel it, get it right up to that bass, and then they would just set the hook. And they'd hook it in the side. Highly illegal. But growing up, these are the things that I saw. And I saw some big fish caught that way. Old three-eyed shrimp, Tim says. My grandpa would keep them all. Any short fish he called towel fish because he could wrap them up in a towel and throw them in the back compartment. 100%. And Dean says, yes, green walnuts will burn their eyes and make them jump on the bank. I did not know that about the walnuts. So, hey, I learned something today. We all can learn every time we get together. That's what this is about. Paul B., my crazy uncle and his buddies would take the old M60s that they had saved up, the big ones, and pack them in wet mud and light them and drop them in the water, and they would sink a few feet down. So this has turned into how to illegally harvest bass. And I could see that. Some guys would put seltzer up in a tube. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, see, that's the thing is, Carson, you're a young dude. Back in the 80s, when musicians could play their own instruments and actually sing, when all the girls had big hair and were not fake, you got what you got. Everything was better in the 80s. Nobody had a cell phone to take a picture of all the stuff that we would have been put in jail for today. Seriously, I saw things back then that probably shouldn't have seen, but when it came to the outdoors too, it was just that way. Spotlighting deer. Do not do anything mentioned in the comment section today. This is great. Seriously though, but yeah, we're talking about that. I saw some serious, guys with 22s that would pop and Jason, Livewell Nooner, great idea. That's fun. Gives me something to do. Hell, I'm going to sit at the shop and talk anyway. And Glaze was the one right there in the comment section. He'll tell you the first time he threw that bubblegum worm over there at Twin Lakes Trailer Park. I absolutely made fun of him, and then I got one. How many deer have you spotlighted, Danny? So I've been involved in a lot of stuff I shouldn't. Jim Wright, I remember cranking a telephone. Seriously, that's what they did. That's something else to think about. If you're in your mid-40s and up, we're probably the last generation to see family members do really insane things like that. I've said this story before. We talk about family members. I was dating a girl in high school, and we were out pretty late one night. And back then, Forsyth County had this program called the Ride with a Cop kind of thing. And they would take these citizens, and they would make them like these honorary cops. So they didn't get to carry guns, but they got to ride around and act like they were cops. And so one late night, we pulled into Big Creek Elementary parking lot. And you guys can imagine. Now, we weren't doing that, but we were necking, however you guys want to say it. And all of a sudden, a car pulls up behind us. And I'm like, you know how you are when you're a teenager. You're like, oh, my God. Well, here comes a guy with a flashlight, and he comes up to the door, and he goes, doot, 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 doot. And I rolled down the door, and it was my damn Uncle Ronnie. So my Uncle Ronnie decided he wanted to be a rent-a-cop. And so the first time I got pulled over or caught by a cop doing something I wasn't supposed to do was by my Uncle Ronnie. And it was like the most embarrassing thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I was like, Ronnie, what are you doing? He goes, Danny, what are you doing? And I'm like, what does it look like I'm doing? He goes, you can't be doing that here. I said, when did you become a cop? There's all kinds of crazy. And the girls just sitting there like, I don't know what the hell. We're having a family reunion right here, and I'm embarrassed. Mike Geiger, I'm 65. I've seen a lot. How many here have been snipe hunting at night with a brown paper sack? I've had some guys try to do that to me. The 80s were the perfect balance of old school and new technology. Dave Raleigh says 1980 here. I get it. Rob Robleski. Hey, what's up, buddy? I wish I was inside in the air conditioning, but since I suck at tournament fishing, I got to work landscaping in this blazing heat. You can come hang out with me right there. So, but Nathan, yeah, cranking a telephone sounds crazy. Now you can go, there's probably a YouTube video on it somewhere. Go look it up. Go look it up. And I will see if my buddy who's in the Marble Hill area will let me kind of show you guys. He might not do it because they are illegal right there. Alex Purse, my pawpaw was a straight up poacher. He set some pretty extravagant traps for deer in some Texas state parks back in the day because he couldn't fire his guns without drawing attention to it. So my father-in-law taught me how to hunt, but I'm not going to lie. He had a deer feeder in his backyard and the biggest spotlight you'd ever seen on his back porch. And if my wife was here, you don't know how many times I've had to hold that spotlight. Now, back in the younger days, we're talking 20, 30 years ago. Also, too, one night we went out spotlighting. I'll give you one spotlighting story. We were up in Dawson County, and we're in his truck. We're riding around, and I got the spotlight, and I'm holding it out the door. And I'm, like, just shining these fields and all that. Well, in the back of one of these fields, we see eyes. Okay? So you have to imagine this rolling field is kind of going down towards the back. And at the very back there, we see a set of eyes. The next thing I know, there's a 30-06 right across my face. He goes, hold it on it. Hold it on it. So I'm holding it on this set of eyes. Well, the set of eyes start walking towards us. And they keep coming. They keep coming. And I'm like, I got one finger in my ear, and I'm holding a spotlight. And I'm like, he's really going to do this shit. He's about to shoot this deer. Well, it kept coming. It kept coming. And all of a sudden, it turned broadside. It was a damn horse. Okay, my father-in-law had me spotlighting a horse. The horse turned sideways, and he pulled back his gun. I'm like, you were getting ready to shoot a horse. That was going to be a hell of a drag. And he was like, I wasn't going to shoot it. I'm like, you would have shot it. He would have shot it. Now, you guys are – now, listen, before we get any comments of like, I can't believe how immoral that was and all that. That was back in the day before we all knew better. But my father – I told that story at his funeral. He almost spotlighted a horse. And we would have killed Trigger right then and there in Dawson County. Somebody would have been really, really mad. Speaking of which, since we're going, how many of you guys used to sneak in lakes back in the 80s when you were young? Glaze is on here. Dr. Glaze, if you're still on here, I don't remember that doctor's name. It was a different world, Paul B. There was a lake over there by Jason's house. He had a good lake in his neighborhood. Get back to work, James. We'll see you later. He had a lake, though, a doctor, and I forget the doctor's name. Dr. King. So he's still on it. Y'all don't know how many times that they would sneak in there. But it had some big fish. But he had one lake out in the field, if I remember correctly, that he would allow us to fish. But he had one at his house right there that I think Jason, and you guys know Shannon Gorman, the aquatic biologist. Okay? They snuck in there. And Jason, you can tell me what that fish was, how big it was. But they snuck in that lake and they caught one. And so if you guys know Shannon Gorman, he might remember that. There's no telling how many nights me and Jason, too, would stay up all night playing ping pong. It was a 10-2. They snuck into Dr. King's lake and do that. Now, who was it? Paul B. said Doug Rice said he got shot at one time sneaking into a lake. See you, Alex. So we could do that. We also would stay up all night playing ping pong because we wanted to be on the lake at daylight. I don't know how many nights we wasted. We were either out chasing the local girls, getting them to try to sneak out, or we would stay up playing ping pong just so we could be there at daylight. And then we would fish. And we'd have to walk to all these. A lot of this happened before we could drive and all that. Paul B., there's no way you could calculate the amount of trespassing I did in the private lakes and ponds. 100%. We snuck in all the time. And that lake that I was telling you about that we got permission when you showed me the bubblegum worm. So we snuck into it. Absolutely. The energy of youth. Back when we could do that. Now, Jim Wright wants to know, how many of you guys have ever been shot by rock salt? I have not. Moist Donut. Listen, every time I see your name in the comment section, dude, I just want to ask you how you got that name. You might have answered that before, but how did you get Moist Donut. That's right, Jason. Sucking face with girls all night and fishing all day. Those were the days. We hooked up with a few, didn't we? Again, that's why I'm glad they didn't have cell phones. For sure. See you, Kevin. But he said, we fished every private pond in Stone Mountain in the 80s. Some of them we even had permission. And what's up, Tim Hancock? Glad you could join us. Me and another guy used to sneak in the lake, camoed up and everything. We really felt stupid when we found out the owner didn't care. I could see that, going through all that work just to sneak in. Jason had a lake too in his subdivision. Lake's still there, but you can't fish it. We went out brim fishing with crickets one time, and we started catching these catfish, and they didn't have a bottom lip. They were deformed catfish, and they were good-sized catfish, but it was almost like their bottom lip was chewed off. Those were the days you could do that. And also, he'll tell you one of the best days we ever had fishing was at a lake called Providence Park. It's a park in Alpharetta. We went fishing one day, catfishing. We're catching these little catfish on the bottom, and a tornado came over Alpharetta, overhead and everything. And the only way we could tell we were getting a bite was our line was blowing so far out. When it straightened up, you set the hook. And I don't know, for about 20 minutes, Jason can refresh my memory, but during that storm was probably some of the most insane catfishing that I've ever experienced in my life. And I think you'll remember that, Jason, if you're still with us. Messick said, my dad took me to sneak in a pond when I was like 14 or 15. Old man came out and fired a couple in the air, and now I can say I've never trespassed again in my life. My dad said, you want to go fishing or do you want to go catch something? See, back in the day, we could do that. Now you get prosecuted. Now you would get prosecuted. But also, too, it was easier back in the 80s because a lot of these lakes were out in the middle of a field. And so you could do your best, sneaking in there. Funny thing about being shot at that lake was many years later, I was a cop, and I went and asked the guy if I could fish, and he let me. Never brought up sneaking in his lake. Ain't it funny how you was a trespasser at one time and then you became law enforcement? Doug, that's pretty funny. Phil said we had a creek that backed up to a farm in Roswell. It was filled with all sorts of sunfish and some small bass. But when they wouldn't bite, we would use a BB gun to shoot the bull in the balls. Sounds like something LJ would do right there. So, guys, think about that, though. Us older guys, how funny. It was a lot easier in the 60s. Mark Edwards says Danny was Mike Longing it before Mike Long. 100%. Providence Park used to have dinner plate size brim in it. I used to go there in the early 90s. It was good. It was pretty good. So, guys, just think about that. And I was glad that, we could use this time. Hell, we've been going for it. We almost went an hour today. We're just going to do this every day. Just something, whatever the topic is, we'll talk about it. All the illegal things we used to do. How girls were better in the 80s than they are now, because they're actually girls, number one. But I'm going to let you guys go, get back at your work. I appreciate you guys joining us. It makes my day a lot easier, and I'm actually looking forward to these. So here's another thing, too. Like I said, while I got some of you still here, if there's a particular thing that you want us to talk about on the Livewell or even on one of these, lunch breaks, email me. If you don't have my number, email me, danny@fngo.com, and say, hey, can you talk about this? Jay Cover, what's up, boys? Making my shift at Tackle Warehouse fly by. Absolutely. We'll see you tomorrow, Jim Wright. Women are better built today versus the 80s. Phil, listen to what you said, built. They're built. They were real back in the 80s, man. Glad you're doing these. Like I said, definitely makes my day go by. That's all we're doing here today. We're just trying to do that. Hey, you guys had to worry about driving a stick shift. Now I don't have to worry about girls being a stick shift back in the day. That's true. How many of you guys can drive a stick shift? We actually talked about that today. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. Y'all get back to work and do what you're doing. Tomorrow night, we'll have a Livewell. I'll be here tomorrow. But like I said, if you got something you want to just talk about, shoot the bull. That's all the lunch break is about, is just getting together, shooting the bull, making your days a little bit easier. And we never know what rabbit hole we're going to go down. So with that, you guys enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And Phil, you're not going to convince me. You're not going to convince me. Great show. Feel good memories for sure, thinking back. Hey, I love it like that. And I appreciate you guys. So we'll see you tomorrow. And I'll see if I can get that crank telephone thing one of these days and show you guys on that. So I'm going to hit the end of the stream button now. I'll see you tomorrow about the same time. You guys be good.